On the 32nd floor of a glass tower, the city sleeps while one light burns against the dark. An intern sits surrounded by papers and glowing screens, exhaustion etched into her face as she works with relentless intensity. Her hands move quickly, weaving order from chaos, rewriting the future of a collapsing empire while no one notices. She is supposed to be invisible, yet she carries the weight of millions in her tired frame. The sound of footsteps interrupts the silence. A powerful figure enters the room and sees what no one else has, a young woman saving the company from ruin. For years, she has been dismissed, overlooked, and treated as expendable. Tonight, under fluorescent light and hollowed cheeks, the invisible is revealed. What begins as a quiet night of work is about to ignite into a story that will shatter every hierarchy around her. The polished floor muffles the approach of power as the leader of Skywell enters, curiosity hardening into disbelief. On the glowing screen is the algorithm that has plagued the company for months, costing millions and fraying investor confidence. Yet here, in the hands of a forgotten intern, it has been rebuilt into something alive, something revolutionary. She is gaunt, clothes worn thin, yet her work radiates precision and brilliance. The disparity is violent. Wealth wrapped in tailored suits on one side, survival wrapped in hunger on the other. The balance of power tilts in silence. What once looked like an unremarkable intern now emerges as the unlikely architect of redemption. The moment is fragile, charged, and impossible to ignore. In that office, under midnight's watch, the roles invert. The overlooked worker becomes the unseen savior, and the empire begins to reckon with its own blindness.
The office air thickens, tension settling like dust. For months, the company has been bleeding resources, unaware that its salvation has lived in obscurity, hidden beneath fluorescent hum and unpaid hours. Yet the discovery is not just about numbers. The woman who rebuilt the system does not live in polished apartments or high-rise condos. Her nights belong to shelters, laundromats, and borrowed corners, where sleep is uncertain and safety a luxury. The revelation cuts deeper than any algorithmic flaw. A corporation worth hundreds of millions has relied on someone who survives without a bed to call her own. In that disparity lies the true story, the wealth of the few balanced on the resilience of the unseen. What begins as astonishment turns into a reckoning. The empire that trades in profit must now confront the cost of never seeing the humanity beneath its own machinery. Months earlier, the lobby gleamed with marble, steel, and the arrogance of success. Through the revolving doors stepped a young woman with a wrinkled resume and a blazer older than her degree. She was met not with welcome, but with dismissal, waved toward a desk in the corner as if already forgotten. Around her, voices carried confidence, tailored suits swept past, and the air reeked of privilege disguised as productivity. She blended into the background, labeled coffee runner, paper filer, errand girl. What no one noticed were her eyes, scanning every detail, mapping inefficiencies, reading the desperation etched into quarterly reports scattered on desks. To her colleagues, she was nothing. To herself, she was a puzzle solver waiting for the right opening. From her first step into Skywell, the divide between power and survival stretched across polished tile, daring her to cross it in silence.
Each morning, she entered the building dressed in neatness that cost her everything. Makeup was applied in restroom mirrors where strangers washed hands. Hair was fixed beneath buzzing fluorescent lights and shelters, and 3 shirts rotated endlessly, giving the illusion of choice. Her stomach growled behind polite smiles, and exhaustion was buried beneath mascara. To those who saw her, she seemed composed, another intern eager to belong. Beyond the glass doors, reality was different. Nights were spent on hard benches, in laundromats that smelled of soap and bleach, or in hospital waiting rooms where her mother fought cancer. Phone calls home carried only victories, never truth, because some lies are told to preserve hope. Invisibility became her armor, her disguise. Beneath it, hunger, fear, and resilience coexisted. The building she walked into symbolized everything she lacked, yet every day she returned, refusing to let poverty erase her presence. The shelter pushed her into the streets each morning before dawn, long before the city cared to wake. Her laptop bag became her pillow, her shield, her constant companion. Some nights, she sat in 24-hour laundromats, where the hum of dryers drowned the sound of despair. Other nights, she lingered in hospital corridors, pretending to wait for someone just to feel safe. Still, by 7 a.m., she arrived at Skywell looking polished, as though she belonged among the powerful. No one questioned how she managed it, nor cared enough to ask. During the day, she delivered coffee, stacked papers, and stayed invisible. At night, when the office emptied and silence took over, she began her true work. Numbers, patterns, inefficiencies, she devoured them all. The empire slept while its ghost intern rewrote its foundations. Every night of hunger and exhaustion became another quiet act of rebellion.
The work of survival gave way to the work of salvation. She reorganized endless files abandoned by others, quietly repaired broken data, and saved senior analysts from embarrassment without credit or acknowledgement. Her hands built order while her name remained absent. The building treated her like a shadow, yet shadows see everything. Only one man noticed, the night guard who walked the halls with quiet dignity. Without words, he left coffee at her desk, a silent recognition of effort unseen by all others. For everyone else, she was furniture. To him, she was human. The company carried on, unaware that its survival rested in the hands of someone paid nothing, someone dismissed as disposable. Her dedication was not rewarded, not praised, but night after night she chose to continue, proving that invisibility cannot erase worth. Every keystroke became resistance, every correction a vow not to disappear. Late one Tuesday night, the office lights hummed as she stared at numbers that felt wrong. A simple miscalculation hid in the quarterly report, yet its cost was catastrophic, millions of dollars set to evaporate. Her breath caught, hands trembling as she traced the error. She knew how to fix it, but fear whispered. She was nobody, an intern paid in scraps of approval. To correct the report was to cross a forbidden line. The cursor blinked on the screen like a warning. Minutes stretched into hours as she wrestled between silence and courage. Finally, hunger and exhaustion surrendered to resolve. Her fingers moved, recalculating, rewriting, rebuilding. By the time the building woke, the report was flawless, the crisis averted, and no one knew. She saved the company in secret. It would not be the last time her invisible hands carried the weight of millions.
Night after night, the unfinished work of others flowed to Maya Bennett like a tide. She blended behavioral economics learned before life derailed with spreadsheets that treated people as equations. Patterns emerged where executives saw noise. Clients did not leave because of prices or features alone. They left because the company forgot how humans decide, hesitate, trust, and return. She built a living framework that paired probability with empathy, forecasting behavior 3 months ahead and translating signals into actions a service team could actually use. The model grew in secrecy, protected on a laptop that doubled as a pillow. Outside, the city counted the powerful by penthouse windows. Inside, the powerless counted hours until janitorial vacuums faded. Between those worlds, she laid rails for a turn the company could not yet imagine. The mathematics did not flatter anyone, it simply told the truth with ruthless grace. The building's optimism thinned into strained small talk. Investors postponed calls. Client churn reports read like weather advisories for a slow-moving storm. Senior staff added slides and adjectives, not solutions. Maya felt the tremor beneath everything, the moment just before collapse when institutions lean on habit instead of courage. Hunger blurred her vision some nights, but the clarity of her findings kept pulling her back to the screen. She copied backups to hidden drives, clean versions labeled plainly, corrupt versions quarantined like infection. The streets taught her that safety begins as preparation. The office taught her that collapse begins as denial. Between them, she held a blueprint no one asked to see. The company teetered on pride while a solution slept under fluorescent light. By the time fatigue finally dragged her toward morning, the future had already moved several steps closer to choosing her.
After the midnight discovery, momentum shifted. Daniel Whitaker reviewed results, weighed projections, and confronted a truth that would not bend. In an instant that rewired the building's gossip network, Maya was no longer an intern. A title appeared with salary and benefits, modest by executive standards, life-altering by hers. The offer did not erase suffering, but it broke the cycle that had turned resilience into permanent emergency. Words spread outward through open-plan desks and encrypted chats, a mixture of awe, resentment, and strategic silence. The marble elevator delivered her to a different floor, where glass made everyone visible and accountability performed for spectators. The air felt colder, the stakes sharper, the carpet softer beneath shoes that had known concrete. She sat at a desk with her name on a placard and understood the irony. Institutions love talent until talent rearranges the furniture. Recognition landed like a spark in dry brush. Departments did the math and found the result offensive. Years of seniority confronted the insult of being surpassed by someone who once fetched coffee. Some called it a miracle, others called it favoritism. The difference depended on proximity to threatened power. Hallway conversations leaned toward caution, hedged compliments, and selective memory. A few junior analysts felt a door crack open and wondered whether their own names might someday enter rooms without permission. Most decided to shut it again. The company's surface remained varnished, but the undercurrent shifted from competition to sabotage. Calendar invites narrowed, updates forked into private threads, and smiles learned to hold their breath. The building had always been a hierarchy. Now it became a test of whether merit could survive jealousy, whether empathy could survive politics, and whether a woman could survive both at once.
Technical systems developed personalities that disliked her. Passwords expired during meetings. Dashboards failed to load when clients were watching. Shared folders performed vanishing acts and returned with formulas bent just enough to seed doubt. The printer stalled on her badge alone, as if participating in a quiet boycott. Each inconvenience wore the costume of coincidence, but the choreography was unmistakable. Maya documented everything, timestamping failures, mirroring files, exporting logs, and stacking evidence like bricks. She kept her voice level and her posture open, because rage would be misread, while proof would be undeniable. The city outside taught stealth. The boardroom required precision. The glass walls reflected a woman learning to turn chaos into chain of custody. In a building devoted to data, she prepared to teach the difference between error and intent, between glitch and weapon, between misfortune and the choice to harm. Stories grew legs where facts had feet. Breakroom whispers rehearsed cause and effect that flattered resentment and punished nuance. A smirk at the espresso machine could collapse months of labor into insinuation. The cadence of ridicule found new rhythms, bold enough to echo along corridors, but careful enough to deny. The cruelty did not surprise her, its efficiency did. Reputation can be erased faster than code can compile. She retreated for a moment into a bathroom stall and practiced breathing steady enough to carry weight. The mirror returned a face that had learned to hide battle scars under composure. Appearance remained a survival skill. She smoothed a sleeve, lifted her chin, and re-entered the aquarium. Invisibility once guarded her. Visibility now required armor. Every step back to her desk was an act of refusal. Every steady glance told the room she would not disappear.
Morning delivered a headline.
sharpened for damage. A technology outlet framed success as scandal, layering suggestive phrases over photographs meant to humiliate. Anonymous sources described late nights without context, competence without credibility, hustle without permission to own its results. Shares multiplied across screens, comments fed on each other until cruelty felt like consensus. Industry partners hesitated. Investors forwarded links with polite alarm. Inside Skywell, eyes slid away rather than risk alignment. Public shaming does what sabotage cannot. It convinces the target to finish the job by stepping aside. The article pulled at every thread of class hierarchy. Worthiness measured by pedigree, not proof. Opportunity assigned to comfort, not need. It tried to turn her life into a cautionary tale about crossing lanes. The damage landed where intended. Hope dimmed. The city moved on. Her hands hovered above a resignation she never wanted to write. The resignation draft steadied her with its false promise of relief. Release the building, release the fight, release the obligation to withstand a daily storm of doubt. For a long breath, surrender appeared kinder than endurance. Yet memory arrived like a witness. Nights in laundromats, the repetitive percussion of machines measuring grief in cycles. Hospital corridors where hope wore paper bracelets. Data sets rewritten under buzzing lights while hunger calibrated patience. The letter promised peace that was really erasure. She stared through the glass at a floor plan that had never expected to accommodate someone like her, and understood the gravity of walking away. The city below glittered like an indifferent jury. She opened her hands and let the feeling pass. The bottom did not collapse. It became counterweight. When the knock came at the door, it met a woman who had already decided to stand.
The night guard entered with the quiet force of someone who has learned to do the right thing without applause. Years of walking corridors taught him where stories bend and where evidence sleeps. He set a worn folder on the desk that changed the room's pressure. Logs with timestamps, edited files traced to specific credentials, messages routed through shadows. A late-night exchange with a reporter carrying intent like a watermark. The pattern that had stalked her now stood under light. Complicity lost its smirk when faced with sequence. He did not offer speeches or comfort. He offered verification. In a building that measured value in dashboards, this was the graph that mattered. She felt the relief of seeing a path that did not require rage to be heard. The world believes in receipts. Her gratitude lived in a nod and the discipline to use them well. The path forward reorganized itself into steps. She backed up clean versions, exported hashes, and created mirrors beyond the company's reach. She constructed a timeline that paired access anomalies with outcomes designed to humiliate. She gathered policy language and matched it to breaches, turning vagueness into liability. The slide she built rejected spectacle. Each page delivered one truth, then another, until denial would have to reject physics to survive. She requested a leadership meeting with deliberate brevity and spent the remaining hours sharpening structure rather than emotion. Outside, the city flickered. Inside, patience settled over her like armor fitted to bone. Survival had taught scarcity. Strategy learned abundance. She no longer defended herself. She defended the standard that should govern everyone. By the time dawn found the glass, the evidence no longer needed anger to speak. It had learned the discipline of consequence.
Morning moved with the choreography of purpose. She met with a junior compliance officer whose curiosity had not yet been edited by politics, inviting observation rather than permission. She collected audit trails from IT with requests written so precisely they could not be misinterpreted. She synced backups, labeled artifacts, and tested the presentation in an empty room where chairs pretended to be skeptics. She practiced silence between slides so the evidence could breathe. She adjusted pacing until a story emerged that cared little for sympathy and everything for sequence. Hallways murmured as she passed. Elevators lifted her toward an air thinner than ground floors offer. The building always told people where they belonged. Today it would listen instead. At the conference room door,
A familiar figure nodded once, steady as a metronome. She entered carrying exactly what power respects when narrative fails: proof. The executive floor presented its usual theater: wood polished to persuasion, artworks priced to signal judgment, glass insisting on transparency it did not always practice, seats filled by rank and ritual. Screens woke with a sterile glow. The agenda promised process. The atmosphere promised verdicts. She connected her laptop, a compact lifeline that held months of invisible labor and the paper trail of its attempted erasure. Her reflection hovered on the screen for a breath, then vanished as the first light appeared. Around the table, some faces calculated risk, some rehearsed neutrality, some had already chosen sides. The building loved consensus dressed as leadership. Today it would learn that leadership begins where consensus refuses to stand. She measured her breathing to the slow rhythm of the air vents and aligned her cursor. The room quieted in anticipation of a spectacle. It received an audit.
The presentation unfolded as architecture. Access logs aligned with badge swipes, connecting hands to outcomes. File histories revealed edits that defanged her model, then blamed the failure on incompetence. Email metadata mapped a path from internal gossip to external publication. A phone record located an off-hours inquiry to a shelter as if dignity were a data field to exploit. Side-by-side spreadsheets showed the precision of her original work against the noise introduced to discredit it. Each slide advanced the argument that intent had masqueraded as malfunction. She reserved emotion for the end and brought forward the only measure that matters in a building like this: impact. The corrected model's projections stood in clean numbers: retention up, revenue recovered, trust rebuilt. The room's geometry shifted. Power lost altitude when faced with sequence. The spectacle never arrived. The standard did, walking in on the legs of evidence. Silence descended, not as mercy, but as recognition. The familiar roots of deflection, miscommunication, misunderstanding, misclick, found themselves cornered by timestamps. Authority, previously performed as posture, became visible as responsibility. A hierarchy that once consumed credit and exported blame felt the weight of accountability settle on expensive fabric. The story everyone preferred to tell, the one where politics is weather and consequences are optional, failed to load. Some stared at the table's grain as if truth might soften. Others recalculated survival in real time. The room adjusted to a reality in which a woman, once assigned to errands, had placed a mirror before institutional habit. The reflection was not flattering, it was accurate. Between slide and breath, the company remembered that systems can either protect status or protect standards. It cannot do both forever. The scales tipped toward the thing that outlasts performance.
Decisions arrived with the calm of a gavel that has fallen before. Termination for the architect of the smear. Suspension pending investigation for the collaborator whose credentials traced edits to intent. Policy reviews scheduled with outside eyes. Guardrails proposed to separate oversight from optics. The measures did not fix everything, but they signaled the beginning of a building that might deserve its glass. She felt a mixture of relief and grief. Vindication carries a quiet sorrow for the energy stolen to earn it. Yet the outcome mattered beyond personal repair. It told every observer that truth could compete with rumor if given a microphone and a clock. As the room emptied, a corridor held space for the small victory of a nod exchanged between those who had chosen to see. Justice rarely feels like triumph. It feels like oxygen rediscovered in a stale room. Later, under softer light, leadership acknowledged something rarer than profit: failure to protect the person who protected the company. Apology arrived without spectacle, crafted not as public relations but as an internal realignment. Commitments followed with structure, audit rights strengthened, retaliation protocols clarified, reporting lines insulated from those they oversee. The empire began to swap posture for practice. For Maya, the moment registered as a recalibration rather than closure. Respect was no longer framed as benevolence. It emerged as requirement. The city outside reflected across the window like a ledger of lives that rarely receive apologies from power. The point was never magnanimity. The point was safety that did not depend on luck, friendship, or silence. A company that had nearly asked her to vanish began building systems to keep others from being erased. The apology mattered because policy agreed to remember.
The model left its hiding place and entered the bloodstream. Teams trained to read behavior instead of merely counting transactions. Messaging shifted from volume to relevance. Service scripts learned to listen for hesitation rather than bulldozing through it. Dashboards evolved from trophies to instruments. The first month delivered numbers that reassembled confidence without swagger. Cancellations dropped, reactivations climbed, satisfaction scores lifted like dawn over an exhausted skyline. Case studies circulated across the industry, first with skepticism, then with grudging respect, then with eagerness to copy. Revenue did what empathy often does when given a fair test. It followed. Maya moved through this momentum with quiet velocity, adjusting parameters, refining triggers, documenting limits. Success tempted celebration. Discipline insisted on maintenance. The work did not crown her. It stabilized a company's relationship to the people who kept it alive. The difference felt like adulthood after spectacle. The key turned with a click more meaningful than applause. A small apartment opened to evening light and the soft echo of possibility. A mattress became enough. A thrifted cable greeted a laptop that no longer had to masquerade as luggage. In the kitchen, a pan hissed with the ordinary miracle of dinner cooked at home. Phone calls with her mother shifted from performance to presence. Hope no longer built on fictions meant to soothe. Insurance approvals arrived without barbed loops of humiliation. The window framed a water tower and a sliver of sky. She placed a photo on the sill and let gravity anchor it. The city continued its indifferent symphony. Inside, silence finally changed costume from loneliness to rest. Stability did not announce itself as luxury. It arrived as choice. What to eat, when to sleep, how to dream without asking permission.
Transformation rarely looks like fireworks. It looks like a calendar filling with the right things. She returned to finish her last credits, writing papers after work about the psychology of scarcity and the decision pathways built by fear. In meetings, she spoke with a steadiness that did not seek apology from any room. Boundaries formed as naturally as insights once did. Declining tasks disguised as favors, elevating colleagues whose work deserved sunlight, documenting processes so progress would not depend on personalities. Friday lunches sometimes drifted into a stairwell where a seasoned guard shared stories of alarms and resolve, and companionship tasted like simple food eaten without pretense. She learned to accept respect without rehearsing for its loss. She learned to carry history without letting it drive. The building around her changed too, inch by inch, as if reminded that excellence can come with calluses. A new department took shape from intentions that refused to remain speeches. Innovation and inclusion received budget lines, hiring authority, and a mandate to surface skill in places pipelines ignore. Apprenticeships paid enough to replace night shifts. Partnerships formed with community colleges, veterans programs, and shelters where talent learned calculus between survival tasks. External audits enforced humility. Reporting lines bypassed the very hands that might prefer old habits. The company discovered that creativity expands when gatekeeping contracts. Maya directed the build with a mixture of engineering clarity and street-earned pragmatism, designing a system that could outlast her tenure and withstand indifference. What began as a crisis response matured into architecture.
The experiment proved itself not by headlines, but by the unglamorous metric of retained people doing great work. The glass tower learned a lesson from the sidewalk and wrote it into policy.
A cohort gathered in a conference room, softened by morning light. Community college coders, returning parents, veterans retraining for peacetime, and night shift savants who had solved logistics with grocery store math. Faces carried the familiar pairing of doubt and stubborn possibility. The session did not glamorize hardship, it translated it into leverage. Scarcity sharpened pattern recognition, displacement built adaptability. Responsibility cultivated time management that no seminar could teach. Portfolios opened like stories, projects paired like lifelines. A curriculum emerged that treated lived experience as data worthy of analysis. The room's temperature changed as participants recognized their reflection in one another. The building had always curated who belonged. Now it curated opportunity with wider hands. When the session ended, the corridor outside felt different, as if the air itself understood that potential is a resource that grows when belief is extended with structure. Morning returned to the lobby, where marble still pretended permanence. Elevators carried names to floors that used to measure worth in pedigree alone. Through those doors moved a leader who once slipped through unnoticed, now carrying binders, budgets, and a blueprint for fairness disguised as operational excellence. The city beyond the glass performed its endless inventory of winners and losers. Inside, a company practiced a different arithmetic, seeing people first, measuring success by the distance between policy and lived protection. Somewhere, a chart bent in the right direction. Somewhere, a shelter bed stayed empty because a paycheck had replaced a plea. The tower no longer felt like a monument to distance. It felt like a machine learning its purpose. The story did not end with rescue. It ended with responsibility handed to steady hands, and with the quiet certainty that visibility, once earned, can be shared.